All right. I am Dr. Stacia Miller. This is Dr. Suzanne Lindt, and you all know us because we're all working on our wonderful projects for Eureka together. But today we want to talk about something kind of different than what we have been doing in our own project. We're going to talk about survey development. This is really going to be the focus of our talk here today, is talking about how to develop a survey. And one of the things that we used a Likert scale. There are different types of surveys, but we used a Likert scale. And one of the things I think that ties well to what Dr. Lindt and Dr. McIntyre and Dr. Whitehouse have already talked about, they all talked about the qualitative piece. And we actually did a mixed methods approach here. So if you remember from Dr. Lindsky's class last week, she talked a lot about mixed methods and that there is a place for that. And so we actually use qualitative to inform our quantitative research and the creation of our survey. And so that's what we want to talk to you guys about today. So whenever we started this research, so many semesters ago, I think maybe 2 or 3, I can't even remember, years ago. Yeah, it was one of my very first things that I did whenever I came to Midwestern. But the purpose of our research was to understand student engagement at the classroom level. We had, heard a lot about NESSE. NESSE is a National Student Survey of Student Engagement, and it looks at campus level engagement. And one of the things I was having a tough time, getting students engaged, and so I wanted to inform my own practice, and so that's kind of how we started talking about this. And then there was a survey that a guy from an East Coast university had brought to one of the workshops, and so we took that survey, and that's kind of where we started, looking at, does informing students about their engagement help to improve or increase their engagement during the middle half or second half of the semester. And so that was sort of, that was the beginning for us. But then what we realized is that we needed to understand, so it kind of goes back to what you were talking about, Dr. Lindt, we needed to go back and understand what engagement meant. And we had kind of went in with this preconceived notion of what it was, instead of really looking at it from a student's perspective and talking to students and kind of defining what that was. So that's where all of this came from. We wanted to look at what are specific strategies, because people always want ideas and stuff. So what are specific strategies that we can share with professors for them to help engage their students more? And then finally, we wanted to develop an instrument. We want get this survey out there so that people can use it to assess the engagement in their class and find out, are their students engaged or not? Because what we do know from the research is engaged students make better grades. Engaged students stay in the class longer, so they're retained better at their university and their programs, whatever. So we do know that engagement is important to student learning. And actually, do you want to share what you just learned, the research about the attendance versus the engagement?
Oh, yeah.
I think that's an interesting piece now.
Well, and I was going to say, a lot of what we found, similar to what we're finding in our study, our current research, is that there is a lot of literature in engagement in K-12. And those of you who've taken Ed Psych know that there are lots of strategies for keeping students engaged and keeping students paying attention, things like movement integration. But there's not as much at the college level, that we're concerned at the college level with engagement in the university rather than being engaged in a class. So that's where a lot of what we found was from the K-12 area, and we just adapted it. But yeah, I was actually reviewing a manuscript yesterday that someone submitted to a journal for publication, and I was reviewing it to give my feedback. And what they found in their study, they went and they asked college students actually majoring in finance. And they asked them about, what they do, and it was all self-reported. So the students talked about how often they study, they reported their attendance, they reported how much they pay attention, several different things. The manuscript wasn't clear on the scales they used, which was one of my comments. But they self-reported a lot of things, and what they found is that even though we know attending class can be a predictor for grades, student engagement in their study was a stronger predictor of grades than coming to class. So, we emphasize so often, come to class, you need to have strong attendance. That's not as important as actually being engaged in the classroom. And I think that that's something that we, expected to find in our study too. But it was just another piece that recently came up.
I know, every day we're finding new stuff. So, like I said, we started with qualitative research because we wanted to inform our survey through, we actually wanted student input. We wanted to develop a survey that was student-centered and had been generated by students, because who are we trying to engage? We're trying to engage students. So we went to the source, right? And that, again, that's one of the things, a lot of the other surveys that we had looked at had not used the students as a source. They had, created it off of other surveys, other literature, instead of actually going to the students. So we wanted to go to the students as the source. So we did set out to do focus groups, and we wanted to do two. We wanted to do an initial focus group during the semester and then have a follow-up later on, just to make sure, for clarification, go back and check with the students to see what they were saying is what we were hearing, and then go back any questions that had not been answered, make sure that we got that information from them. Because sometimes during a focus group somebody may get left out or may not have enough time to get their full statements in and stuff, so we wanted to make sure we had plenty of time. Have y'all talked a little bit about focus group research at all? So, the idea behind a focus group is you have a group of people who all have a similar reason to be there, okay? And really the recommendation is at least 5, try to get no more than 10 people, because you want to make sure that everyone is engaged, because if you have 20 people, then someone's going to get left out for sure. And then you have what's called a moderator, and the moderator is there to answer or to ask the questions. They're really not there to inform. They don't want to inform anything. They don't want to sway anyone. They don't want to, point in a direction. They want to ask the question and then let the people interact and kind of bounce off of one another. Now, they may ask clarification questions for, just to clarify, so that whoever's going to be looking at the data, and they may also ask follow-up questions. So can you tell me more about that? But they're not supposed to lead the research in any way. So we recruited students by going into classrooms, and we passed out little SurveyMonkey links through going into classrooms, and then also via D2L. And we invited students to fill out a demographic survey, because what we wanted to do was make sure that those that were invited to the focus group, sort of represented the campus. And so through this demographic survey, we collected gender, we collected age, we collected, if they lived on campus versus off campus, so traditional versus non-traditional student, because we wanted a representative body of students in our focus groups. And then
different majors.
In different majors, yeah. So they reported several different things on the demographic survey, and then we took the demographic survey, and from that we randomly selected, once we had organized, sort of organized it by these categories, we randomly selected 40 people. 20 and 20? No, 20 people, 10 and 10, sorry. Yeah, that makes more sense based on what
And
I just
it wasn't
said.
random, we intentionally...
No, it was intentional, you're right, intentional sampling, because we wanted to make sure we got representatives. So we invited 10 people for one focus group, and then we invited 10 people to another focus group. And so we're going to have these 2 different focus groups, okay, so that we got 20 people. But what we ended up with was one focus group of 5 people, okay? So when it all was said and done, based on student, like you guys know, you're busy, it's hard for everyone to meet at the same time. People forget stuff. So at our very first focus group, our initial focus group, only 5 students showed up. And we decided to go to one focus group because we weren't getting the email responses back that people were going to attend. So we said, okay, so let's just have one and see if we can at least get 10 students. We only ended up with 5. And then we invited those same 5 students back for a follow-up. And so those same 5 students, they came back for the follow-up. And so from that focus group data, we were able to, and I guess I should also say, we did not lead the focus group. We wanted to be out of the room because we wanted students to be honest. We wanted them to not feel threatened because there's professors in the room. And so we actually stepped out and let Sabina, who was our Eureka student, lead the focus group. So she was the focus group moderator. And was Adam in there? Yeah, and then a graduate student also was in there to help with the recording. But we, ourselves, we stayed out because we thought that they might be more candid and more willing to answer their questions that the students had. So then we took that data and we transcribed and we broke it down, we coded, we looked for themes, and we ended up with 5 different themes that came out of this data. And so in spring of 2014, we started looking at these themes and how we were going to use these for our survey. So, and we had 5 of us looking at the data from the focus group. So we had triangulation, okay, so that we were all coming up with the same ideas here. It wasn't just, oh, Dr. Miller said or Dr. Lindt said this was a theme. These were actually themes that we all saw coming out of the data. And so one of our themes was relevance, looking at the value of the course material to their personal and or professional life.
And I'm so sorry, just to stop you, to answer the question, what causes you to be engaged?
Oh yeah, sorry. Okay.
So yeah, our question, overall in the focus group and our research question we were after was, what causes you to be engaged? And these are the things that we found.
These are the 5 things, sorry. Yeah, I did not say what we were asking. So the students told us they wanted to be relevant. And so their statements over and over again, relevance came up as a theme. So some of the comments that you can see from, and we just took a few comments from the transcribed data. I know I need the class, but I honestly get nothing out of it, so I'm disengaged. So not feeling that it was relevant, disengaged. Okay, life experiences relate, so that was important to the students. So we saw a lot about relevance, and on this theme, we've had some questions about. We've had a question from a physics professor who said, well, how do I make, and I don't even know this kind of physics, I don't even know the name of it, but how do I make this physics class relevant when it's a stepping stone. They have to learn these equations and these formulas and stuff in order to go to the next physics class. But is this relevant to their day-to-day life? No. Is it real life? Is it real world? No. It's really so that they can learn the next thing. And so then, how do I make that relevant? And I think that is a challenge for professors. How do I help students understand? And so, we've talked a lot about, what about you guys? How would you approach that? Because does relevance mean that it's real world? Or what's another way you can approach relevance with students?
I think in that example, you could make them, help make them understand that it was a stepping stone that they needed for the next part. And then maybe kind of give them a little overview of how the next part is the part that connects to reality.
Okay. So show the building blocks.
Right.
Show it to them and why this is important. Okay. Any other ideas?
I agree, because if you're learning about equations and stuff like that, and you don't know that you're going to use it in the future, then you may not try to learn it as well as you may if you did know you're going to need this for the rest of your life in your field.
Okay. Any others? All right. So again, relevance is important, but how we deliver relevance is going to differ a little bit from class to class. History, I think of history and social studies. Sometimes relevant students think, oh, well, why is this relevant that I learned something that happened 100 years ago? And I think that's a challenge for history professors, but I also think that if they could find a way to make it more relevant, students may be more engaged. And that's just my opinion. But the other theme was instructional practices, looking at how the material is presented to the students. Students appreciated certain kinds of instructional practices, but they said that it was important. Obviously, the dry, direct instruction all of the time bored them. Or if they only sat there and had to listen, if they weren't required to do anything along with what they were doing. The type of instructional practice. Classroom climate, the environment set by both the students and the instructor in the classroom. So this one was kind of surprising to us that was this the one? Yeah, I kind of hate that we don't know everyone's name. So professors making students learn one another's name and actually knowing their name themselves, and making sure that it says if they know their name, they actually feel a responsibility to that professor. They feel like they need to be paying attention because this professor knows who I am and knows my name. So the kind of climate that the professor sets, and then also professor traits. And I thought this one was pretty bold. I mean, in all of the things that we read, instructor's personality and attitude toward the class. We had a student who said that the professor walked in and said, we know everyone has to have this class for the core, so let's just get this over with. Well, what would your attitude be if that happened?
That was positive.
Okay, probably shut down. I mean, one of the students, Krista, said that in the TLRC, that as soon as the professor said that, they automatically shut down and said, well, then I don't care about this class. So, the professor traits are very important, being passionate, being enthusiastic about your subject. And because all three of you are teachers, I know I can say this, we talk to you guys about how much energy you bring relates to the students and how much energy they're going to bring. And I think that's the same idea here. And then our final theme was student traits. And this was one that we forced, okay? we went back in our follow-up because the students, we were wanting students, this is kind of that qualitative piece, we wanted students to say what they needed to do to be engaged. But what they told us and what we found from our first focus group was students are putting this onto the professor.
Right.
They're saying, I am more engaged when the professor does these things. Well, in our follow-up, we told Sabina, ask some questions about students. What do students need to be doing to be engaged? We want to know. We want to see what they have to say. And so a theme did come out, but it wasn't